Singing and singers, to sing or not to sing. You must be worrying by now how you, or if not you, who on earth is going to front this record? If you already think you are a great singer and a well-happening front person, then we have a problem. It means you will have the sort of ego that will render it totally impossible for you to be objective about everything else that has got to be done. Singers have historically made the worst producers of their own work. The reason for this is simply that singers have to become so emotionally involved in their performance, it cancels out any sort of overview. At the very least, they need a musical partner that can give them some direction. If a singer was able to have this calculated view of their own work, the end product would undoubtedly come over as cold and empty. So if you see yourself as a singer, find a partner fast before going any further. If you do not have any ambitions to sing, it looks like you are in luck, as we have entered a period of pop history where singing as a focal point to communicate the emotional content of a #1 hit single is not necessary. The potential of this is something that seems to have been forgotten since the Beatles took their place on the world stage back in 1963. Yet again, we have to thank the advent of DJ-style records for helping rediscover this fact. The club DJ, like his forerunner, the dance band leader of the 30s, 40s, and 50s, realizes that the most important thing is keeping the dance floor full. And the thing that keeps the dancers dancing now, as it was then, is the music with its underpinning groove factor. Singing throughout has always just provided a distraction from the main event, what is happening on the dance floor and not on the stage. The balance is to have a vocal chorus with instrumental verses. This will be the form that a sizable percentage of chart music will take for some time to come, long after the novelty of scratching and blatant sampling has worn off. With debut records that become big hits, it will be even more noticeable. A debut record on becoming a hit relies totally on its novelty quality. There is no fan base rushing out to buy it. Instant voice recognition of the artist doesn't exist. People don't get into the quality of the singer's voice until they have heard at least 3 tracks by him or her. A quality singer might sell platinum albums and go on to have an incredibly successful long-term career, but the sound of their voice would have never got their debut single to #1. Benny Hill had more of a chance getting to #1 with Ernie than Aretha Franklin ever has. The only way a singer's voice can help it get to #1 is if it has such a distinctive quality the world can't help but react to it instantly, almost to the point of inspiring ridicule. Kevin Rowland's performance of Gino, Save Your Love by Renee and Renate, and With a Little Help from My Friends by Joe Cocker are 3 examples that spring to mind. We are sure if you check your Guinness Book of Hits, you will find dozens more. So unless you know of somebody down your way who has got a ridiculously outrageous voice that's going to grab the punter's attention with one hearing and work in the context of your record, forget it. The world is full of competent singers that don't get to #1. The vocals for the chorus of your record are going to be easy enough to sort out. They need no individual distinctive qualities whatsoever. When you get into the studio, they will be able to book a couple of backing singers for you. All studios are in touch with numerous local singers desperate to do any sessions they can. You only have to decide whether to have male, female, or a mixture of both. Of course, if you want an all-lads-together type chorus like we had in Doctorin the Tardis, you just rope in whoever's hanging around at the studio at the time and record it. That cuts out having to pay proper session singers. Nobody would dare ask to be paid for having a laugh, acting the lad. Buy them a pint and they will be well happy. Singers, good or bad, are invariably a problem. They not only make incredibly bad timekeepers, which can lead to disastrous consequences when you are facing a jam-packed schedule during the period when your record has entered the top 30 but not yet made #1. They also tend to confuse their role as singer of songs with that of would-be world leaders. For the majority of people, the sound of the vocals and the words that are being sung throughout the verses just merge into an all-over sound of the track. The words that are being sung could be any old gibberish. Only the words to the chorus have any real importance. Of course, there are exceptions, when the classic narrative song breaks through and storms the #1 slot. These can never be planned, and I'm sure the performers of these freak hits are as surprised as anybody when it happens. So unless you want to risk everything on some bizarre tale you have to tell, stick with us. When it comes to TV performances, singers make obvious focal points for the cameraman. Thus, the viewers at home are forced to watch. This is not because what is coming out of their mouths is of any great importance. It is just the easy option tradition of the medium. In fact, most singers, on top of the pops, make complete prats of themselves. The viewers at home amuse themselves discussing this pratishness, either the size of the singer's nose, his taste in shirts, the dickhead state of his haircut, or their shaggable qualities. This last example is usually done in such a disparaging and sexist way that it hardly inspires any real admiration. That said, you will need an act to go on TV with. People will need some sort of human focal point to relate to. When you get your 3 minutes of primetime TV exposure, you are going to have to grab the nation's attention in whatever way possible, and at the same time keep the program's director happy. The first half of 1988 saw numerous DJs standing motionless behind their pair of Technics, desperately holding on to their cool. Its novelty value soon wore off. We will sort out the problem of having a nation-grabbing act together in a later chapter, once you have the track written and recorded. The type of devotion inspired amongst pubescent teenage girls for a certain singer or band takes effect on the second or third single. The hype machine is usually only smelling the scent by the second single and can then only shift into top gear on the third one. The chapter's précis is the quality of a singer's voice, and their attractiveness is only of any real importance in terms of a follow-up career. The verse, the bass riff factor. So now you can tackle the construction of the verse without worrying about singers. Using the basic groove you have decided upon, you are now going to have to choose a bass line that will work as the basis for the whole song, or at least the verse sections. We take it there is no point in us trying to describe what the bass line is in any great detail, but it's the bit in the record that throbs and keeps the flow going. In days gone by, it was provided by the bass guitar player. Now it is all played by the programmed keyboards. Even if you want it to sound like a real bass guitar, a sampled sound of a bass guitar will be used, then programmed. It's easier than getting some thumb-slapping dickhead in. The groove might already have a killer bass line in there, making the whole thing happen, and to remove it and exchange it for another might destroy what you've already got. There are plenty of monster bass lines out there to try. You will know them. They are the ones that you can almost hum. The great thing about bass lines is that they are in public domain. Nobody, even if they do recognize it, will seriously accuse you of ripping somebody else's bass line off. Michael Jackson, who we cited earlier on for not being that adept in coming up with the killer #1 hit choruses, can come up with the bass lines. Billie Jean was the turning point in Jackson's career. That song, on his own admission, took him into the mega stratosphere where his myth now reigns. The fact is, Billie Jean would be nothing without that Links on the Prowl bass line. But he wasn't the first to use it. It had been featured in numerous dance tracks by various artists before him. Jackson and Quincy must have been hanging out around the pool table in their air-conditioned, dim-light atmosphere LA studio one evening wondering, what next? Then one of them came up with the idea of using the old Links on the Prowl standby. Without making that decision back in 1981, there would have been no Pepsi-Cola-sponsored jamboree in 1988. We are not trying to deny any of the very real talent that Jackson has, just trying to emphasize the possible importance of the killer bass line. Serious groove merchants hate it when a song has a dynamite bass line for the verse, and then when the chorus comes, the chords change, dragging the bass away from its bad self into having to follow these limp-wristed chords. For them, the whole movement of the song is destroyed for the sake of some nursery rhyme element they would rather see dumped. Somehow, these two important elements are going to have to be made to work together without the power of the chorus or the propulsion of the verse bass riff being destroyed. Ideally, when a song hits its chorus, it should feel it's the natural thing to happen, a release from the tension of the verse. By the end of the chorus, you must feel like nothing is desired more than to slide back down into the vice-like grip of the bass line. Some groove merchants have a talent for getting it all their own way by coming up with a bass riff that never shifts from the beginning of the song until the end. Intro, choruses, verses, breakdowns, outro, all fitting around the same bass riff. For a song to sound like this and work away from the confines of the dance floor, it is going to have to be a real mother of a riff. There must be some pretty insistent action going on top of it to keep the casual radio listener interested. Even on Billie Jean, they moved off the bass riff for the choruses. For the time being, the only decision you are going to need to make about the verse is going to be making this decision on which bass riff is to be used with the other elements in the groove track. The intro. This is simple. The classic thing to do is to have an instrumental version of the chorus. Sometimes a record might have a full-blown vocal chorus in the intro, but this is usually considered giving it all away too soon. The other regular intro used is created at the mixing stage of the record, where different elements can be thrown in until the whole track is happening. This is something you can leave to the engineer who is doing your mixing. They are usually full of creative ideas on how to start a record off. They usually like to hear a bit of atmospherics. They tend to think it denotes class. If he comes up with anything good, use it. This is a route that we originally took, but at a later stage, on the advice of our radio plugger, we stuck a weirded out version of the chorus in the intro. Bridges. Don't even think about them. They are for the more musically mature. If one happens, it will happen in the studio. Your programmer might come up with an idea for one that helps take the song from the bass riff of the verse up to the celebration of the chorus. As always, if it's any good, use it. Just remember that if somebody else who is directly involved in the making of your record provides you with chords for the bridge, he has every right to expect a cut in the publishing. Not that giving away some of the action should deter you from using whatever is going to turn your recording into a number one. The breakdown section. Yet again, you don't have to concern yourself with this at the pre-studio stage. Just account for its length in bars when you map out the structure of the song. Use the bass riff from the verse or some enticing variant of it that the programmer can come up with. When mixing, the engineer should strip the track right back and then start piling in with the studio wizardry and gimmicks before hammering into the final chorus. In years gone by, this was the part of the song that would feature a solo. Nowadays, solos either get in the way or have to be fabulously stunning at the same time as being able to fit in with the studio sculpting that is going on around it. Having some guitarist give you his interpretation of what a really good guitar solo should sound like is totally out of the question. Guitar solos only work in modern pop records when they are over-the-top things full of hideous histrionics and lacking in any emotional depth whatsoever. This type of guitar solo is one of the very few things that heavy metal has given back to the top 10 chart music. Yet again, Jackson's name comes in here. It all started when he used Eddie Van Halen on the Thriller LP. So unless you have a mate that can play just like Eddie, forget it. The only other reason for having a meaningless solo on your track is to give the record some instant profile upon the record's release by making it known in the media that it features a boring but sainted muso, thus giving it some fake cred. The tried and tested guest soloists of the late 80s are Miles Davis on trumpet, Courtney Pine on saxophone, and Stevie Wonder on harmonica. Untried possibilities that might create some interest would be Jimmy Page or Junior Walker. But really, we would recommend you don't bother, unless you can get Jimi Hendrix to do it. The last time the guest solo really helped on the number one record was Stevie Wonder on Chaka Khan's I Feel For You. In the end, it only provides the DJ or radio one with a bit of talking point, or at best a clincher angle in getting a Newsbeat interview. When songwriters were craftsmen that sat in front of their pianos, heads filled with melodies and hands searching for chords, and long before multi-track recording studios became a vital aid in modern song construction, they would call this part of the song the middle eight. It had 8 bars. They would entertain themselves by introducing a different chord structure at this point with a refreshing new melody. This technique still has its charms, but you can leave it to the people who take a pride in writing songs for the sake of their craft. Even Elton John doesn't bother with them these days. It's the sort of thing that Green from Scritti has a go at. The outro. Back when whole bands went into a studio to record their songs, they would pride themselves in their tight, well-rehearsed, snappy endings. Either you could end on fading over repeated choruses, or have a couple of choruses and sink back into the moody atmospherics that started the song. Yet again, your mix engineer is going to come up with the answer for you. Hanging bits. In some records, there will be 1 or 2 bars stuck in between 2 of the sections where most of the music stops and a few bits are left hanging in the air before the whole track comes crashing back into the next section. We do not know if it has an official name, but it serves the purpose of adding dramatic effect to the song. It is a bit sophisticated for ourselves, but your programmer might recommend it. Give it a go if he does. That's it. There are no other parts that can possibly exist in a number 1 hit record. Re-listen to your copies of Now That's What I Call Music or Hits, and practice picking out the different sections, counting the bars as you go. Keys, notes, and chords. There are 12 different major keys and 12 different minor keys. In each key, there's a scale of 8 notes, the 8th note being the same as the first but an octave above. A chord is where 2 or more notes are played together. There are 3 basic major chords and 3 basic minor chords in each key. You do not need to know the above, but if you want to, that's it. Each song is recorded in a particular key. You can get the programmer to decide what key your song should be in by telling him that you want it to be the same as the basic groove you have picked. Some number ones change key towards the end. The reason for this is an attempt to add dramatic effect into a song which is beginning to flag. Zager and Evans, in their staggering In the Year 2525, a number 1 in 1969, took the unprecedented decision of moving their song up a key for every new verse. This added to the stunning qualities of the record, something that today's 7-inch single buyers could not handle. Friday morning. Friday morning, phone the studio. Check that everything is okay for starting at 11 a.m. on Monday morning and that the programmer will be there on time. By Friday night, you will have to have got yourself a title, a groove, a bass line, lyrics, and melody for a chorus that you can sing at the top of your voice in the bath on Sunday evening. Write down the basic structure of the 7-inch version in your notebook. The weekend. Take it easy over the weekend. Start fantasizing about videos and Top of the Pops performances, things you will say in interviews, and what your old teachers would think if they knew you had a number 1. Have some wild ideas for record sleeves or silly sadistic or sexy sounds to sample that can be used in the 12-inch mix. See what crazy ideas your friends come up with. Don't be proud, use them. They will love it. Basically, have a good time Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday, because the following week is going to feel like the most dreadful few days in your life. You are going to wish you had never seen this manual and rue the day you ever thought you could put it into practice. At times, suicide will seem the only way out. Years of financial disaster will stretch out ahead. The debtor's goal your only home. Up until now, you might have felt these chapters have been riddled with cynicism. Cynicism is a terrible, disfiguring character trait if used by the individual who is forced to carry a bitter chip. He will use his cynicism to cope with the weight of life and all its trials. But cynicism harnessed to your advantage can help debunk fraudulent mysteries that prevent us from sharing in what is possible and what is ours. At all times, cynicism must be balanced with a belief and faith in the intrinsic goodness of our fellow man. Nobody really wants to be bad, even when they are pulling the trigger or handing out the towels for the non-existent showers. You are not going to be able to cheat your way to the top. It is only by nurturing the goodness that everybody wants to express are the doors going to be held open for you. We all have the capacity for unlimited fantasy. It is the fuel of genius. Do not be afraid to turn on the tap and let it flow. As we discussed before, a record will automatically equal more than the sum of its parts. However coldly we calculate the making of each part, our personality will be there on the record for the world to feel. Fantasy can be a dangerous area to delve into, an unreal place to escape into. Fantasy is also the place where everything starts from, the place where a personality can grow, where the best laid schemes of mice and men have all bred before climbing onto the drawing board and long before the plowshare has had a chance to lay it all to ruin. Do not be afraid of your fantasies. Dive into them. Swim far out and see what other strange fish are swimming with you. Bring what you can back. It will be these discoveries that you will be able to channel through the strict golden rules of the 7-inch single. Without fantasy, there would be nothing. Man would have stayed up the trees, never ventured into the cave. Einstein would have never foregone his relativity, Christ his ascension, Leonardo his Mona Lisa, Hitler his Third Reich, and Betty Ford her clinic.